Welcome
A notable welcome to all you music lovers
to something that I like to call
Journey
to the stage.
It's all about music.
Music.
And more.
music.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back
Your host,
Brian.
Frazier.
All right, quiet on the set. Places, everyone.
Well, welcome everybody. This is Journey to the Stage, and I'm Brian Frazier, and you are you, and I'm glad that you pulled up a chair to join me and my guest today for our great chat. As the tagline to this podcast says, every artist has a story, and every story has a beginning. So this podcast really is about the story of the artist, the steps that they've taken to get where they are today, and this is their journey to the stage. So journeys have ups and journeys have downs, and they're filled with successes and setbacks, cheers and tears, broken strings and bright new dreams. This podcast exists to capture their stories and to walk a stretch of road with them. So every 2 weeks you can join us, and you have an open invitation to do so, and I'm glad you've chosen to do that today. As somebody who celebrates melody and good song crafting, I'm looking forward to my chat with our special guest today, singer-songwriter Florence Dore. So I'm an indie podcaster who relies on good folks like you to help others to know that we're here and chatting with great artists. So if you have 30 seconds today, please consider giving a rating or leaving a review on whatever platform you listen on. That's always very much appreciated. Or you can subscribe on my YouTube channel. And for every kind review we get today, Florence and I will personally be your personal chefs for the weekend. So you have that to look forward to. That, of course, is a joke, but I love good reviews. So for you guys, everybody listening today, you're in for a real treat. Ensconced in the artist throne today is singer, songwriter, author, and professor Florence Dore. Florence has a new album out. It's titled Highways and Rocketships, and it is a very, very easy album to love. Florence, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Journey to the Stage.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm so excited to be here.
How's life in your neck of the woods these days?
Chapel Hill's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty beautiful weather. We often jump right from winter into summer here, and we've actually had an extended spring, so we're sort of relishing it. And I've been on the road quite a bit over the last 12 months, so it's kind of a great time to be home.
Oh, that's beautiful. So I'm in the middle of big old California, and I know what that's like. Sometimes the transitions between seasons are not great. And before we get too far, I want to thank our mutual friend, Wendy Brentford Jones, for connecting us. So thank you, Wendy. So I'm really, really glad you're here. Yeah, I'm so interested in hearing your story and diving into your album. And so when I think about certain occupations and vocations, there's always a first time that a baseball player picks up a baseball, or a mechanic picks up the wrench for the first time. For you as a singer and songwriter, do you remember that moment you picked up a guitar for the first time?
Oh, yeah. I was really little.
Oh, yeah.
I was really small, and my mom's a bit of a hoarder. I don't know. There was a guitar in the house. She doesn't play the guitar. She didn't play the guitar. I don't know where it came from. And as well, there was a book of songs, really simple folk songs. I mean, it was the 60s, so I don't know, maybe everybody was required to have one in their home, along with, Beatles records and Bob Dylan records and stuff. But I remember learning Libba Cotton's Freight Train on the guitar when I was 7 years old, just teaching myself and getting really, I had already been immersed in listening to rock records that my mom had. This is something I write about in my book, Ink in the Grooves, just sort of being entranced by certain rock songs that were just being sort of tossed off, played on the record player. And so I was already really transfixed by music. And so to come upon this book and, knew there was a guitar around, just pull it out and figure out how to tune it. We didn't have the internet, of course, so I'm not really sure how I did that. I guess somebody taught me. Ask some adult near us I know. There was a woman who I knew who was my camp counselor. And I was like, how do you tune a guitar? Anyway, so just taught myself guitar at a very young age and just started writing songs and learning how to play and getting really interested in music. So from a really young age.
That is really, really cool. And you have really a very interesting career path because you're not only a musician, singer, songwriter, and artist, but you're an author, as you just mentioned, and a professor. But all of these strings kind of tie nicely together and fit well together. Kind of walk us through how you
Yeah,
arrived at these three somewhat varied points, but some in
sure.
some ways very intertwined with each other.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's a great point. I appreciate your looking into the history enough to notice the weird and interesting kind of amalgamation of all these
Hmm.
things that has taken place over, let's say, the last 8, 10 years of my life. I always wrote songs. I always played music. I had bands in high school and college, and continued to play music after college while I was in graduate school. While I was in high school, and playing songs and loving music and listening to it and studying it on my own, I also sort of discovered the beauty of literature and kind of how much I loved immersing myself in that and learning how to write about it and think about it, and kind of I had a knack for doing it, and a high school teacher pointed that out to me, and so when I went to college, it just all was the same thing, as I say in Ink and the Grooves. Like, my time in, studying literature over the arc of college through graduate school into adulthood was also a kind of era in which rock and roll was part of my life. So I would go to shows, I would play shows, I'd come home and study. And so it was all kind of intertwined
Hmm.
for many years. And then, one grows up and things get demanding, like bills have to be paid. And I
Right.
did keep going all the way through being a junior professor at Kent State University.
Mm.
I made my record when I was there. Well, I was actually at NYU for a couple of years doing a postdoc, and I made my record while I was there and playing around town. And
Mhm.
so I was able to do it all until I had a baby. And that's how I met my husband,
Yeah.
actually, who's a drummer. And he was touring with Steve Earl. When I had the baby and the job and the touring husband, it was like, yeah. And actually, this is funny. I remember the last time I played a show out before I kind of returned to this whole thing 5 years ago or whatever. And that was opening for Farmer Jason Ringenberg as Farmer Jason at the Cleveland Public Library. And Will
Oh.
having to roll the 2-year-old out of the room screaming. And I was like, okay, this is going to be on hold for a little while. And so it was. And, I had to write books for tenure, and the work of a junior faculty person is really demanding. There's so much to do, and I was a
Mhm.
mother and had the touring husband, and so that just took my focus. And now she's heading off to college. In fact, the song that I'm just finishing now is about what it feels like to have a child grow up enough to leave home. As she became more self-sufficient and adult, my husband and I started working together, writing songs, and I wrote some songs, and just, everything sort of took off from there, the new record and everything. So I'm really happy to be back into it. It's a good time. When you have a kid and your kid's leaving, it's a really good time to have a pursuit that envelops you as music
Yeah.
envelops me. And I'm not angry or anything that I had a baby and couldn't do it for all these years, but it is a joy, a real joy to return to it. So
It's all about seasons.
it is, that's right. And then the academic piece actually kind of came full circle too, as you noticed. I actually wrote an article called The Rock Novel when I
Oh.
noticed that all these authors about my age, so middle-aged people, were the best authors, by most standards in the United States, were kind of writing in a literal way about rock and roll. And so I wrote an article about that to try to understand what it meant. And as I was returning to my second book on Southern fiction, actually, I was reading a biography of Leadbelly that Steve Earl had
Mm.
recommended to me, Chip Lornell, and it was a really great book. And I read in there that John Lomax had brought the singer Leadbelly, Hetty Ledbetter, to the MLA, which is the largest gathering of literature professors in the whole world, in 1934, and was blown away by that, and became curious as to whether Leadbelly at the MLA had any cultural significance that could be tied to the rock novel at the turn of the 20th century. It turns out there's a ton of overlap between literature and rock and roll. So the second book came to be about Southern, it's called Novel Sounds, Southern Fiction in the Age of Rock and Roll. So it's about the overlaps between literature and rock. So, and actually, as I was reading up for that book and doing my research, I was reading all those Peter Guralnick books. One of them, Sweet Soul Music, was just really so attached to that book, and was listening to all this, re-listening, right, to all the songs, William Bell and Ray Charles and those early rock and rollers, and just sort of inevitably got drawn back into the craft and writing my own songs. So that was part of
Wow.
what happened. So they did all kind of come together, all those threads.
That's really, really interesting. And do you come from a family that was musical? I know there was obviously a guitar in your home, but do you have musicians or singers or anybody in your family that maybe impacted or influenced those early years?
No, it was more trying to escape my family that music enabled me
Yeah.
to do. It was, sort of, I mean, this is an interesting hippie 70s Nashville family, but it was really chaotic and kind of, alcoholism and narcissism. And so music was kind of a way to feel good.
Yeah, I can understand that. That does explain why there's so many years between your albums, because Perfect City came out in 2001. I was like, wow, she really rode the momentum for Highways and Rocketships. But that explains it. You were being a mom and you were enjoying that season of life, and that season's changed a little bit, so you're able to go back and reincorporate something else that you love, which is really, really neat. So obviously music's not the totality of your life, which I think you being a professor and an author, all of those things must feed into your songwriting, which, you have a lot of lived experience through those things and family and everything. So
Yeah.
that's just has to be such a big impact on your writing.
I have a new song that kind of became, we went over to Kilkenny, Ireland and Dublin, and
Mm.
we played in this wonderful festival over there, the Kilkenny Roots Festival. And the song is 12 Ways. And it kind of morphed into a song about any kind of meeting that people hate, the stupid things that the people do and how pissed off you get. The lyric is 12 great minds and 12 ways to fuck it up. That song was infectious.
Yeah.
It actually became a sing along, because who can't relate to being at a job and having a bunch of people at a meeting just ruin something that's important to you.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you're right. Like, something about the lived experience definitely comes into the songwriting for sure.
Well, I want to play a song. There's so many great songs on this album. I love the whole thing, and as I mentioned in my introduction, it's an easy album to love. And some albums are, they're a little bit of slow burners, but some are just right out of the gate, just like, wow, very engaging. And so that was my experience with this album. Even from the first time I played it, I'm like, oh, okay. So we're gonna play a song. We're gonna do two songs in our time together. We're gonna play Lighter first. Let's check this out, and then you can give us a little bit of background about it. So this is Lighter from Florence Dore from her latest album, Highways and Rocketships.
'Cause I'm a lighter.
know the story that you wanted to tell with this song. It's a really, really great song. Tell me a little bit of background about it.
Yeah, listeners may be familiar with the DBs, the band that my husband was a part of when he was a youth.
Wow.
And the DBs had a huge influence on this record. I was a fan, of course, when I was in the 80s, but Peter Holzapfel, he was one of the, when you're first returning to music, for me anyway, I was like, wow, did these songs suck? Or am I actually going to be able to do this again? And so I took them all to Peter, and Peter Holzapfel, and he helped me a lot by just being there and listening, but also in really practical ways, showing me how to edit things. And I mean, he's such a pro, and he's done so much amazing
Yeah.
musical work. So he really was instrumental in figuring out how to edit and put these things together. And now when we're touring, actually, we tour with Gene. Peter doesn't tour with us; he's home and doing his own stuff. But Gene Holder, so we have the DB's rhythm section often on tour,
Wow.
which is pretty unbelievable. And so it's a real DB's influenced song, I would say.
That's really neat. Now you teach about songwriting. So I'm curious then what your process is and how does your process compare to what you teach? Because sometimes, what happens in our head and what we might speak to others might not be the reality that's for us. So how does that interact with you?
I mean, I think that I can talk about my process, and I love to hear about other people's process,
Mhm.
right? It may not be the same for my students who are writing songs, but I think there are certain givens and certain kind of disciplines that apply to all songwriters. And so
Mm.
basically, I'll show them a song. For not Lighter's not one of them that I've ever done, but I have showed people the first lyric and then what it became and tried to trace for them how, even though that process is not totally conscious. So it's often just an approximation to something, because I can't remember, well, why did I change that? It does sound more cliche, but what was I doing when I made it better? So you just trace that. But I think there are tools and disciplines, so writing 10 minutes every day about some object and kind of using all of your senses and just doing free write for 10 minutes every
Mhm.
morning, which I try to do always in my life. But sometimes, on tour, it's pretty hard. And there are moments when things get rough. But right now I'm in writing mode. So I'm definitely doing that every single day. And it puts up your antenna,
Mm. Mhm.
as a songwriter. And that's just true for everybody. Things do occur to you. So the song on my record, Highways and Rocketships, the title track, that emerged after a long period of just sitting there and rolling up my sleeves and trying to come up with stuff. And when you do that, I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do
Mhm.
waiting for inspiration. So inspiration does hit, but there's certain kind of rituals and tasks and ways of thinking about the world that if you're immersed in those, you're gonna be visited
Yeah.
by a lyric or by a melody. And so those are the things I teach the students and then just have them workshop their songs.
That's really interesting. That's kind of the Hemingway approach. He was very disciplined. He would write a certain amount every single day, whether the muse sat on his shoulder or not. It just became an exercise for him.
Most people who write do that because, yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of myth about writing, a lot of
Mhm.
mythology, like you have to be in pain to write, or, I mean, I used to believe that when I was younger, and I like make a joke about it sometimes when I'm playing out and do that song Thundercloud, because it's like, yeah, you don't have to have a broken heart to write a song. You can write about other things. For example, other people's apparently broken hearts. So there's all kinds of approaches. And I think that one of my tasks when I'm teaching songwriting is to take the mythology out of it. One of the tools we give students or I give students or offer to them is the discipline of writing every day. And I know a bunch of writers. I know novelists and songwriters. I don't really know anybody who doesn't do it.
So it's interesting. I'm so curious as somebody who has not only studied songwriting but teaches it. If you had to choose between a beautiful melody and very mediocre lyrics, or incredible lyrics and a mediocre melody, which would you choose?
wouldn't choose. I would just find the right words for that beautiful melody, and I would find the right melody for those beautiful words, you know? I just don't think you ever have to choose. There's an infinite possibility, an infinite number of words and concepts and emotions
Mhm.
that you can bring to a beautiful melody. And I like your question a lot because it raises one of the features of songwriting, which is that you have to be attuned to what you're describing. That is
Mhm.
this kind of beautiful reciprocity
Yeah.
between lyric and melody.
That's really interesting. I've had the great fortune of being able to talk to some of my favorite songwriters, and one conversation that continues to come back to me
Mhm.
is with Glenn Phillips from Toad the Wet Sprocket. And he
Mm,
shared, and I've even alluded to this in a separate podcast, but he would talk about maybe trying to force a song. He
yeah,
said that when he matured as a writer, he realized he had to kind of let go because the
yeah,
song wants to kind of take on a life of its own. And
that's right.
what that does is it gives the listener a greater ability to interpret that song as opposed to
Mhm.
finding the meaning that that particular writer wanted to impose upon it. Do you find that to be true in your own experience and that of other writers that you maybe have studied?
Yeah, I think that it's a big piece of songwriting is to get out of the way.
Yeah.
I can't I somebody else, some other songwriter that I was reading said that same thing. I can't remember who it was, but I think everybody who actually does write songs experiences some version of that. I
Mhm.
understand what he means by forcing, you know. That's kind of what I meant when I said I didn't like the lyrics of Lighter when I first wrote them. They felt forced. I knew I
Mm.
liked the song,
Mhm.
but, when I return like, so and then you just leave it alone for a little while so you can get yourself out of it, and then when you come back or maybe while you're washing the dishes or walking your dog, something will come to you and be like, "Oh, okay, that works."
Are there any writers that maybe modern or historically that you find to be really fascinating writers, songwriters, song crafters? Because there are great ones and there are good ones and some that maybe we might not be drawn to, but who are the maybe some of those writers that you're like, wow, this person is at another level? Anybody like that for you?
Yeah, Chuck Prophet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, I this shifts for me all the time, you know, I don't always have the same kind of inspirations, but I just think he's brilliant.
So before we listen to another song, I want to hear a little bit more about what your husband does. You said he's obviously a musician as well and has played with Steve Earl.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit of insight into what his career path has been.
Oh, he's a drummer. He's one of the most influential drummers in the country, I think, for certainly for alternative rock and roll. I think REM cites him as an influence. I mean, he's
Wow.
he played in high school bands and with Mitch Easter and all these people in Winston-Salem. That's kind of there's something in the water there, obviously, or there was in the 60s. And then they all grew up to be really incredibly innovative, cutting edge musicians. So they formed the DBs and went to New York, or maybe that was they formed the DBs in New York. You have to ask him all the
Yeah.
specifics and ins and outs. So, but he played there for a number of years, lived there for a number of years, played on a beautiful record by this woman, Sherry Knight, who doesn't make records anymore,
Hmm.
on Steve Earl's record label, E Squared,
Wow.
and sometime in the, I don't know, late 80s or early 90s. And Steve hired him to play drums for him, which he did for 16 years, and
Wow.
we started dating. Can't remember if it's before he started playing for Steve or and I remember when he got hired, but I don't think we were dating yet, so
Yeah. How involved was he with the making of Highways and Rocket Ships?
very major production ideas, in the
Very cool.
studio, you know, like I said, helping me write that song and
Hmm.
coming up with suggestions, quirky suggestions all the time, and just I remember I think you're about to play "Sweet to Me"
We are.
at the end of that track, looking over, he had stopped playing the drums, but he was still kind of moving his arms with the sticks up in the air, and it was like he was vibrating. It was
Wow.
like something was vibrating through him, and, you know, I he's a magical drummer. And I think what he does on that song, he's amazing all over the whole record, but looking at him at the end of that song and watching that, it was like this is not we're not in reality in any sort of way that I recognize right now. So
Right. Well, that's really, really interesting. And what a great team you guys make. That's really, really awesome. And I appreciate you. We were going to play a different song from the album, another really good song, but I appreciate you letting me call an audible here and playing Sweet to Me, because this is my favorite song on the album. This
wow.
song, we're going to play it right now, and I want everybody to crank it up. That way you won't hear me singing in the background. So let's listen to this. This is Sweet to Me by Florence Dore, and then we're going to talk about this on the backside.
Up on that mountainside, my home before I died. The piney
what a song. This is going to be stuck in my head for the rest of the day. This is so great.
Oh,
That harmony is so sweet. It's got an incredible hook. It's got several hooks in this
yeah,
song. Very singable, which I think is something we're missing in a lot of modern music. It's not singable for the average person. This song, the melody is so sweet and it's just great to sing along to. Tell us a little bit about Sweet to Me.
sure. Thank you for your lovely compliments. So actually, it was funny. I started that song after I finished my first record, and we were playing it out and everything, but then life took over and I didn't make a record, so it was just out
Gotcha.
there. Although somebody asked me at one point, "Where can I hear Sweet to Me?" And I was like, on my demo,
Let me know.
and
Yeah.
yeah. So I returned to it when I was writing because I always really liked it when I was writing the album, and I added I added a C part, like
Hmm.
another part to it. And I remember talking with Steve. I definitely talked to him, and he helped me too when I was returning to songwriting. And I said, and I just can't remember what exactly we were talking about, but Steve Earl said, "You don't make a song better by adding a bunch of chords to it." My C part that I felt like, well, I'm more mature now and coming back to the song was like, let's take that right out. So it's actually exactly how it was the years ago. Some lyrics changed a little bit, but
Hmm.
it's an elegy to my grandmother, who I loved, and who took really great care of us. So sort of trying to say stuff from her point of view, but yeah, it's her life. She grew up in Centerville, Tennessee, actually in the house next to the
Oh,
farm next to Minnie Pearl. And
really? Wow.
yeah, and she has a sister who we called Nani, and Nani was very closed, and they ended up having living together when they were old until they died. And so she was very closed and very kind of stiff and difficult, and my grandmother was very warm and loving. And so, and she had difficulty in her marriage with her husband Tom. My daughter was 16 when we went in to record the song, and so at the very end, on the outro, when it's out in the galaxy, that's Georgie, that's our daughter. And then my
Oh, that's
sister
awesome.
comes in. Yeah, my sister Catherine comes in with, I hear your elegy. So it just becomes really trippy. Mark really helped the trippy aspect of it with his crazy guitar stuff. But it was so beautiful to me that my daughter never met Granny,
Oh,
and so it's really lovely that, first of all, my sister, who also really loved her, gets to be part of the tribute, but also that my daughter can connect to her in this otherworldly way, so it feels really
yeah.
good. People in Ireland, I don't know, somebody told me that I don't know what it was, but people in Ireland loved it. They were very connected with the grandmother piece, and really, somehow, I don't know if grandmothers hold a special place in people's hearts there, or maybe it's just everywhere, but it made an impact there, and that made me feel so good.
Yeah. Well, if you look at Irish folk music, there
Yeah.
is a great tradition, a true ballad tradition of sharing history and telling story from generation
Totally.
to generation. So I'm not surprised that that would find a special meaning there. That's really
Yeah.
beautiful. That's really, really cool. Yeah, and I saw that your album was voted Best Americana album by Lonesome Highway Magazine. That's a super cool honor. That's kind of
Oh,
cool.
I was so incredibly honored, yeah, and those guys came to we were playing at the Americana Fest. Actually, we didn't get into the Americana Fest, but we still did a tour, and we're in Nashville at the time, and so we played at this fabulous club, Dee's, Country Cocktail Lounge in Madison, Tennessee, and they have, I can't remember what it's called, I think they call it the AmeriCarnival,
Oh, okay.
and so they have just music, 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 music the whole time, and, we had a really fantastic show there, and these guys from, Ireland and Scotland showed up, and, we hit it off. They loved it, and they were like, "Oh," and they wrote about it, and So these guys that had never heard of us, why would they have? And they came, they just walked in, they're like, these guys are really good. And then they kind of go, oh, okay. So two members of the DBs, somebody who's in Sunvolt in the band, and
Wow.
yeah, this is really good. And just out of their own sense of beauty, were drawn to it and wrote about it, and then gave us that really amazing honor. So then they also came over to the Kilkenny Roots Festival. I think they put in a
Oh,
pretty sure they put in a word for us to get into the festival. And so, anyway, the whole thing was just pretty smashing.
that is absolutely super, super cool. So tell us what is next for you. I know that you've got lots of dates booked out. Are you going to be doing a lot of playing this summer? Or are you kind of more just in writing mode?
I've got some stuff that I'm going to announce soon that's pretty exciting at the end of the
Cool.
summer, sort of starting in July. And I'll know more about that pretty soon. So, before I take off again, I'm going to write as many songs as I can. The next thing will be to make an album. I'm hoping to come to California and do a small tour there in October. So we'll see how that shapes up.
Cool.
And I'll definitely take your advice about where to play in your area. So,
Yeah. Well, if you're
um,
anywhere nearby, I mean, it's obviously such a very, very long state. But
yeah,
if you're within driving distance, I'd love to come out and
we'd love
support
to
you.
play
And
in LA.
yeah,
Thanks.
I'm just a
Great.
few hours north, so I catch shows in LA all the time, even in the Bay, San Francisco.
Cool.
I'm
Cool.
happy to
Well,
do that.
that's
So
what we would try to do. So, and then I think the next step will be to go forward. I have an incredible label. I want to give a shout out to
yeah.
Propeller Sound Recordings. It's a new label, newish, a couple years old,
Hmm.
and in fact, it was my kind of collaboration with Jefferson Holt, the head of the label, that started the record, that got the record rolling. He's been an incredible, almost manager type. He's definitely like my manager, though he's not
Yeah.
doing that anymore. But he's been really supportive, really involved, really, bouncing ideas off of him for years now. And from that collaboration emerged this record label that has put out some early DB stuff that's never been put out before, and
Oh
put my
wow.
record out. Now Laura Cantrell's new record is on there too. Dexter Romweber has a new record. So it's a newish label. It's emerging, and they've been so amazing and so supportive. So I'm lucky to have them, and I think that we'll collaborate on the second record early 2024. I think.
Beautiful, beautiful. And where can people go to get the latest updates, information, tour dates, where all that good stuff? Where can people get that all from?
FlorenceDoreMusic.com. Come on over. You can also go to Instagram, Florence Dore Music on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, Florence Dore Music. Same on Twitter, although I don't really use Twitter that much. If you want to join my mailing list, then you'll have all the updates on all this stuff. And I would love to see you. I don't know if all your listeners are out in California, but please look for us and come on out, support live music. The show has become really a lot of fun, really
That's awesome.
exciting. So,
Well, now you've got two whole albums of material to draw from. Probably makes
yeah,
your set list a lot more enjoyable and things like that. So yeah, I mean, so this audience spans 130 countries. So wherever you play, we'll
yeah,
have people there to
come
support
on.
you. So yeah. All right. So one big question, big meta question before we wrap up our time. If you could pick one artist to share the stage for one song, who would you pick and what song would you want to do?
Oh my God.
It could be living or from the past. One song, one stage, one artist.
Let's see. Mm, Emmylou Harris, I guess.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, that
Hmm.
seems a little obvious. I feel embarrassed that I didn't choose somebody a little more
Oh,
obscure.
she's great though.
It's
No,
just-
she's great.
I would say either her or Julie Miller.
Oh, yeah.
I opened for her once with the first record, and my God, that voice fills up a room. She is such an amazing singer. Okay, one of those two. I know you said just one.
That's
So,
okay. And then what
yeah,
song? Do you have a particular song you would love to do with one of them?
let's see. of my own songs, it would be Wi-Fi Heart, but maybe, I mean, I can just think of bazillion songs, but maybe I'll keep it with mine by Bob Dylan.
Oh, nice.
I
Oh,
think
that's a
that's a
great
really
choice. That's really interesting. I have an episode that's releasing on Monday with another female artist, and she said Emmylou Harris and Julie Miller. It's so interesting that you guys both cite those as
You
huge
did?
influences. She did, yeah, yeah.
You move through the Rolodex of your mind just without much thought. I mean, the two most beautiful voices alive, I mean, they would have to rise to the top.
Well, Florence, it has been great hanging out with you today, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for listening, and it's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
Great, and I appreciate that. And I will put all the links to everything that Florence mentioned, so up to all of her socials, to her website. All those will be in the show description. Just scroll down. So wherever you listen to music, add Highways and Rocketships to your library, add your favorite cuts to your playlist. Be sure to catch Florence when she visits your area. Buy a t-shirt, buy merch, go up and say hi. And remember that every time you support an indie artist, an angel earns its wings. So please subscribe to Journey to the Stage. You can follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, on our YouTube channel. And I appreciate you tuning in today, and join us next time in a couple of weeks when we'll walk a stretch of road with another artist. So keep your bags packed and join us on our next Journey to the Stage. And that, my friends, is a wrap. And we're out.
Great.